Welcome to Whachacha's Tabletop World, a channel devoted to the love of board gaming. My name is Sweetness Whachacha, and today we're looking at the 7th cycle for the Marvel Champions, the card game, which is Next Evolution and the hero packs therein. This is the second wave of mutants, and this deals with X-Force. I think we've had X-Men, and we're going to have more X-Men, and this is just a little bit of an offshoot there. I should mention that I'm a huge fan of Caleb Grace, who designed much of Lord of the Rings. I'm a huge fan of that, and that's going to color my feeling about this cycle quite a bit, actually. So there's a lot of borrowed mechanisms in the sister games. Sister games being Arkham Horror, the card game, Marvel Champions, and Lord of the Rings, the card game. They share designers. They share a lot of similarities in the way that they're released, and they're very singular in the world of board gaming in terms of being living card games that are all cooperative and continuing on, of course, as living card games. But I was really excited. A couple of mechanisms that I really love within the Lord of the Rings game are what they call mining. The dwarves have this mining mechanism, and then player side quests. And I was really excited and hopeful for when those things would sort of make their way into the Marvel Champions game, and they really have with this setting. I think when the Next Evolution box set was announced and I saw Cable and I saw the player side schemes, I was like, oh my, I was more excited for seeing that than I think I have been for anything else in the game. I was thinking about different decks to build and stuff, and I'm not as into this as I was into Lord of the Rings. I played hundreds and hundreds of games of this, but nowhere near what I would play for the other. But I do really enjoy it in a much more casual way. So yeah, without further ado, let's get on to my thoughts. So let's just get into the Next Evolution box set itself. We'll talk about the heroes and the player cards. Now, Cable himself, as I mentioned, really fascinating. I really was so excited because he's sort of interacting with all those side quests. You can pick one out, you can have one start. He's a hero that's really, really interesting to play because, you can start with something that gives him a boost and will allow him to do other things, so you can clear his side scheme and then clear other side schemes faster. There's all kinds of cards that interact with side schemes that allow you to, Overwatch and Chance Encounter, and one way or another that incentivize you for having those side schemes, and then him being able to defeat one, ready Greymalkin, ready himself. Really fascinating, and it's a fun little puzzle to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to work on the thing I want to work on to help me or and my teammates, or am I going to go off the main scheme and stuff? And those really provide some really fascinating things. I love his kit so much, and also not just what it means for him personally. Having those decisions are fascinating. Like playing his deck is so fascinating, but also, what can you bring? What does that change for all the other characters? Because you can start with a side scheme or a player side scheme that will allow you to power up other characters. Because if a character really for their deck wants a certain kind of thing, well, you just start with that side scheme so they can go grab it. Really, really interesting and really great for the life of the game. And that's not even touching on the other aspects of his kit. Domino, really, really fascinating as well. You mill cards, take cards off the top of your deck, discard them, and you can swap them. Sometimes they come to your hand, and that's the dwarving mining mechanism I kind of talked about. And I really love stuff like that. So certain games, I remember when I used to play Magic the Gathering, I played for a few years, many years ago, and I loved playing the kind of decks that you bounce things back and forth, onto the table and into your hand, and you're always doing stuff. And I always felt like I just want to be doing stuff because it's fun. You're doing things, you're occupied, you're thinking about stuff, even if you're not necessarily winning. But Domino has a lot of that where you're moving things around, and it's a very, it's a nice, I'll try to talk about this a little more when I talk about the hero packs. But there's a bit of an added complexity there, and it's really, really fun to solve that little mini game of a puzzle. And she's quite powerful and quite interesting to play on her own. Player cards, the side schemes I talked about, that's such a fascinating, game-altering thing. It changes the entire game. Everything that's come out now is colored differently, and you can play differently, which is fantastic. So that's a huge deal, and I like that there's so many options. Ones that fetch you different cards from your deck, ones that do damage to things, ones that heal people, ones that take out minions, and etc. And they're also thematic, taking out the guards. You complete that, and it's you snuck up on them and knocked them out. I just think that's so fascinating, awesome. But other player cards, like Uncanny X-Force, new affiliation that they have, really, really cool, and it feeds into that whole side scheme thing, or just kind of makes you better at thwarting and stuff. So I think that's really, really pretty awesome. There's also some really interesting allies that come in this, like Phantomax, and Deathlock and Deadpool. All of them really, you can really build them up. That's a fun archetype to build up allies, and I think that's really fun to play that way. And those three are really good for that particular archetype. Mission Planning and Even the Odds are kind of like ridiculous cards, but they're fun to have in the pool. Like I think that, one style of playing is to try to like maybe not play the most powerful or most efficient or most interesting, but just to play in some wild way of like, hey, can I pull off this insane combo? And it's kind of fun to build a deck around that and to play that and just to try to make some of these cards work. They might be not the most efficient or powerful, but they're very, very interesting and they have their own rewards in playing them. So I think that's kind of a cool couple of cards we got. Overwatch is another really great one. I mentioned, that coming in with Overwatch and Chance Encounter and One Way or Another and all those sort of things. That's a really huge card to have come out as well. I really think that's pretty awesome. So without getting bogged down too much, I do want to mention a little bit about, spoiler-free, about the campaign itself. The first couple of missions I really loved. The Morlocks, the whole Mutant Massacre thing was one of my, I should mention I'm a lifelong X-Men fan, a very, very huge comic nerd my whole life. And I remember reading that when I was very young, and I'm really, really loving that. So I like that they've taken something maybe a little bit off the beaten path. I think that's really cool, and and kind of protecting the Morlocks and having Mr. Sinister's Marauders as villains was really cool. And I tend to like those scenarios quite a bit. They've done this a bit with the Sinister Six and the Brotherhood of Mutants. Those, the Mansion Attack mission. I like the ones when you can replay them a lot, and they're very, very fun because they're always going to be a little bit different, having like a lesser villain and stuff. So I think they're really interesting, and they were really super fun scenarios to play. Juggernaut was a total thematic win. I really enjoyed him as a villain. I think it's very interesting, like just that you're getting taxed in different ways in different scenarios, and he has that overkill, and he can attack you if you let those momentum counters build up. He gets stronger and stronger, which is a thematic win, and also kind of interesting because he has that overkill, and even like if you are in Alter Ego, if you let him get too strong, he will still attack you, so he's a very, very threatening villain, and the idea of like knocking his helmet off, again, very thematic, and a neat choice of when to do that, so you can like get rid of those counters and kind of like slow him down, and that kind of tempo hit you take to do that. Very, very fascinating. I love the team up he has with Black Tom, his little modular set in there. I really like that because it's also very thematic to the comics, and it's a very interesting one. So yeah, Juggernaut was a total win and a very nice, different, like a very interesting scenario to be able to pit yourself against. Now, as a completely opposite thing of Juggernaut, I love the Mr. Sinister scenario, whereas Juggernaut's sort of like this attacker, he's more the schemer, and his whole scenario is very interesting as well. Attacks you in completely different ways, which I think is fascinating, and also very thematic win. When you play the campaign, he starts with a side scheme that you really have to have an answer for. Really pretty interesting stuff. And he has, in the way they have this genetic thing going on, and these different ways to sort of upgrade, give the villain upgrades and things, and you can carry those over into the whole rest of the game. Maybe one of the best modular sets they've ever had. So I really like that, and his scenario was very cool. Then lastly, you have Strife, who is not really my favorite kind of villain to play. I get why they use the design space of like counting up what kind of cards you have in your hand, but I personally hate that. I often play double-fisted, meaning I play two heroes against the villain, so I can get more out of the game that way, and get more out of the villain deck, etc. And I hate counting up the cards, and then counting up the cards, and then counting up the cards. Every time I'm going to go do something, it's just a lot more headache and a lot more like fiddliness that I don't really prefer. So I did play it to make sure I could beat the campaign, but he's not one I'm going to go back to again. Now, overall, the campaign is really fascinating. It might be a little overpowered in a way, how you can go and get all the, I love the fact that you can pick which upgrades you're going to bring in and what you're going to go for, and then you're going to continue using that through the campaign. It might be, like I say, a little too powerful because you get to get whatever you need for your kit or your teammate needs for their kit. But it's really kind of cool to be able to get those setup pieces in and decide which things to use and when to use them. I think this might be one of the best campaigns so far, just in having those options, but also being very interesting how they all balance out and in having the ability to choose what you're going to go for. I'm a little sad we didn't get any extra, like villain packs in this cycle, like Mojo in the past or Green Goblin or something like that. We just had the box set, so I'm hoping that they'll do a little bit more with the mutant stuff before we move on back into the regular rest of the Marvel universe. But other than that, those are just the villains that we have. Now let's talk a little bit about the hero packs briefly. Angel, what a great hero. Now, I love this character thematically. Archangel, Angel, I love that they have that. I personally really love heroes that get to change their forms a lot. Ant-Man's one of my favorite heroes, and when he came out, I thought it was so fun to play him. And this, you have a lot of choices because he has different stats and different drawbacks in each of his different forms. Also, like, I love any kind of hero or any kind of, in this kind of game that enriches the whole card pool. Now, any kind of a hero that comes out, like Cable, all about side schemes and introducing that kind of a game, that kind of a mechanism to the game, really fascinating, and that interaction there is great. And he does the same thing kind of for aerial cards. Now, I don't really use aerial cards. I haven't really done much with them really at all. And this is a great way to bring those out and give them more life. And it just breathes more life into your collection. Into play, and give you an excuse to play cards that you haven't really played before, and that I think is really, really fascinating. He's a very powerful hero, but very complex. So you got a lot more. There's a lot of support for changing forms, which he can do quite a bit. I like having those options, but also his puzzles a lot more because his cards are so versatile and they depend on what form you're in. And because you can only change form once per turn, it really, makes some painful decisions and some interesting decisions because you can use those cards for different ways and you can try to get a lot of benefits. Now, he does draw a lot of cards, which inherently makes him a very strong hero. That's generally something that makes a hero very strong. He has a lot of other things that make him strong. So, and sometimes it is fun to play a very powerful hero. I think, you play Hulk or you play Valkyrie and it's, you're getting beat up and you're not able to do much. It's not as exciting. It's not as fun. Of course, I don't want to steamroll the game every single time. I want to have a good challenge, but sometimes it is fun to break out a more powerful hero. And his kit is very interesting. I think he's able to. If you use honed technique and like his razor dive, his aerial, and his response on Archangel, I wonder if he's able to hit the highest amount of damage from single card attacks. I don't know. That might be the case. I haven't explored the game enough to make that definitive, but I know that he's a very, very, very powerful hero, and he's fun to play. That's Angel. Psylocke, another character that I really love. She's a very complicated hero, but she's really fascinating. It seems like she's going to be weaker because she only has a four hand size, but really interesting to play because you have those upgrades. You're always going to get those 2 resources. I found her fascinating, and it's a different puzzle because the other heroes and stuff, you can flip form, and even like Ant-Man and Angel, who can go into multiple different forms, you have a bit of that because you can flip your stats. You can move your stats, and sometimes you might want to pay for something with a mental resource, but you want to stay with your strong katana upgrades instead. And so you really get to pick and choose, and that's an interesting little puzzle of how to spend and what to be in, and then the idea that you can flip down. She has access to Cerebro, so you can really go through and pick different heroes and other X-Men, bring them out of your deck. And she can go, you can fill your hand up by being an alter ego a lot, so I like to flip with her a lot. A lot of interesting choices. She's a fascinating one. I think she's a little harder to get into and understand, but I think once you learn how to use her, she's very rewarding because you're able to do a lot of different things with her, and she's maybe one of the most versatile heroes out there. So yeah, very, very fun. And she comes with some interesting cards as well. I meant to mention, Angel comes with Taunt, which is a card that, just to go back real quick, I'll kind of cover both of their cards at once, I guess. Taunt was a card that was introduced with Angel, breathes a lot of life into older decks as well. It's a protection card that helps to, heroes that want to be attacked, like Spider-Man and Spider-Ham. And also Cannonball, really amazing ally for aerial heroes and stuff, and some really great support for the aerial stuff. Psylocke has Upside the Head and this whole new archetype of Float Like a Butterfly, and she's kind of I also should mention she's also a Confuse Factory. She can confuse a lot, which is an interesting hero to have, and also she starts off with Piercing, which is really very potent. You get used to that so quick when you go back to a hero that doesn't have it. It's kind of a little bit of a rude shock. Which is pretty interesting. Also, she has a skill finding card, which is like I think it's martial practice or martial defense practice, something like this. And it's really a unique card that you can go in your deck and grab out skills and things, and that adds a lot of interesting deck building possibilities for her as well. So Psylocke, very, very fascinating. Moving on to X-23, she's a super fun hero as well to play. There weren't really any duds in this whole cycle, I don't think. But before I actually get too far into X-23, I wanted to mention for Psylocke and Cable and Domino and Angel, they're all significantly more complex than older heroes. So this whole cycle is adding a lot more complexity, and while that might make the game a little less approachable, I think it's what the game needs. I mean, essentially, like, you can't just have all the same cards and all. You just keep making characters stronger, or you have to add that complexity for players that are continuing to play the game and enjoying the game, so that you can continue to not get bored with things. And I think this whole cycle is way more complex, way more head-scratching heroes, and I think that that's really necessary and welcome for me for the game. X23 is not quite that way. I think she's much more straightforward, but she's super fun. It's all about readying, and she interplays with Honey Badger really well because she readies her, and juicing up everybody's stats is a really fun way to play. One of the big archetypes in the game is by making your hero strong and attacking a bunch or doing a bunch of things. And that's kind of a cool thing to do, and she's one of the best heroes at that because she can ready and take damage, but you're always using her health as an economy, so it's kind of a fascinating little puzzle in that way. But yeah, she's very similar to Quicksilver, where you'll always defend with Quicksilver, and you always try to do things twice. Where you always almost always defend in the villain phase, and if you take a little damage, you ready up, and then you can do that again in the player phase. So very, very fascinating hero, and I'm really looking forward to this new sidekick card to come out. I think with Honey Badger, it was kind of ready made for her. That's coming out in the next cycle. Really, really some fascinating stuff. She also comes, because of that, I think she's much like Quicksilver, where all the aspects she works so well in, and you're going to play essentially the same kind of a game with her, but it's nice little added different flavors to do so. I think, and her cards comes with, she comes with the side quests that you can go and specialize characters. I think it's maybe the most influential, bold but true statement here. I think it's the most influential card printed for all of the game. I think that is the most going to change the most decks in the whole game, because any multiplayer game, you're going to have access to a whole bunch of cards for everybody. So if you don't even care about X23, but you want to change up your collection in a significant way, those specialist side scheme that grabs these specialist roles, really, really, really potent and very game changing in general. So yeah, super, super fun to play. And lastly, we have Deadpool, and Deadpool is he's very much known for breaking the fourth wall. It'd be nice, She-Hulk is the original person to be the fourth wall breaker. When Deadpool came out, he was, Rob Liefeld made X-Force and a lot of these characters, and he kind of didn't do a lot of original stuff. He kind of took things from other characters, and Deadpool's a reflective of that. And I wish that we would have seen more of that with She-Hulk's kit, but it came out in the base game in the core box, so they couldn't get away with anything too crazy. But it does really work here, where he has the whole the pool aspect, which changes things up significantly. I think this is the kind of hero. I'm not really a big fan of this character, and I'm not really a big fan of this. I think this isn't my go-to way to play, but I think he and maybe Star-Lord are really good examples of characters that I think the game needs, because they're weird ways to play. He can't die. He can die in Alter Ego, but he can't really die. He just keeps taking these hits, and you can keep adding these acceleration tokens. And I think he and Star-Lord allow you to do these really bonkers things that's great for the life of the game, to have these really different ways of playing, and these, with Star-Lord, you just have these piles of encounter cards, and it just seems insane to do that. And I think it's kind of interesting sometimes, for laughs, and just to try different ways of playing the game and approaching the game, and you can make these really wild, crazy combos or do these insane things. He's a really good rush hero. You can just go through and beat a scenario before things kind of get going, which is interesting. I think having different, each of the heroes in this cycle have, you got one, Psylocke is confusing a lot, X23 is reading a lot, he's doing this thing about the rush hero, so they each kind of go in different directions a little bit, which is kind of a cool thing, I think. And anyway, yeah, like I say, I think he's great for the life of the game. I'm not really that interested in the pool aspect, but I think it's cool that it's there, and this is kind of a neat, the best take on this character, and the kind of person that was, if somebody approaches the game and they're like, well, I don't know that much about the game, but I really like Deadpool. Well, here you go. This is going to match exactly that, your personality type in terms of playing that. So really kind of a very interesting way, and keep the game a little bit fresh and kind of explore all that space that the game can offer, I think. So yeah, very, very strong cycle. I thought it was fantastic. It added enough complexity and enough new stuff to really get me re-engaged and re-interested. Now, I loved everything to boot so far. I've really loved and enjoyed, but it's generally around here. I think for the other for the sister game Lord of the Rings, I think just after the 6th cycle, which was one of my favorite cycles, I felt like, man, they need something, and they added this whole whole new mechanism. In that game, it was ships. You were on ships and stuff. And in this game, they've like added the side schemes and a lot more complexity to these heroes and things. So I think at that point you start to get a little bit, okay, we're ready for something new, and they really delivered on that. So yeah, I love this whole cycle of the cycle 7, and I can't wait for the next one. But yeah, let me know in the comments below how you felt about the cycle and whether I missed something or not. But yeah, but for now, I gotta roll.